In 1973, Darryl Anka was personal witness to not one, but two close broad daylight UFO sightings while in transit on a California freeway. Feeling on some level that these sightings were part of an unraveling for him into the true nature of reality, he urgently set out to understand much more about the universe in which we live. This journey led him on a quest that has now lasted over 30 years. Well known for his work in channeling the entity known as Bashar, Darryl has not only gotten a close-up view of how reality works, but through Bashar, he has imparted hundreds of messages of wisdom and perennial philosophy that have been shared with millions all over this planet. This interview is no exception. We begin with a short anecdote that Bashar shares with an audience member during a live channeling session. The theme is imagination and how this often underutilized ability that we all have can literally shift our lives from one reality to another in an instant. Listen in.
In order to get there, you have to make money. So is it
in order to get where? Did you just state a belief system? In order to get there, you have to make money. Very interesting little equation. Is it empirically true? No. Is it true for you? Maybe. Do you prefer that to be absolutely chiseled in stone?
No.
Not necessarily. Can your imagination come up with any other way you might be able to get there without necessarily having money? I'm not saying money wouldn't be the way, but you don't know that yet. So why limit yourself? No money at all. How can you get there with no money at all? Zero.
Right. Then
Come
I'm
on,
already
use your
there.
imagination.
Then I'm already there. I don't know.
You can put it in practical terms. How can you get there with no money at all? Yes, it will help if you have the vibration that you are there. That can be the magnetic attractor to attract the circumstances that can physically get you there. But I'm asking you to exercise and stretch your imagination a bit here. If you're going to be a teacher, you better have more of an imagination than this. Do you understand?
Yes, I do.
All right. Shall I give you an example?
Sure.
Oh, all right. Many of you have heard us tell this story. We will tell it briefly now. A friend of the channel's was a photographer. Passionate about taking photographs of the sacred sites around the world. Didn't have a dime. Didn't let that deter her from staying in the state of her passion. And because she stayed in the state of her passion, she had a thought that would not have come to her had she been in any other state. Remember, you can't perceive what you're not the vibration of. Yes?
Right.
All right. So, the thought she had, we understand. Most people on your planet would say, that's crazy. That will never work. She didn't let that deter her. She stayed in her vibration of preference. And the thought she had was, well, I don't have a dime. I'm passionate about going around the world and photographing all these beautiful sacred sites. I'm going to go to the airline and I'm going to ask them to fly me around the world for free. Crazy? What do you think?
It seems so.
Seems so. Only by the definitions you've been taught.
Right.
Yes?
Yes.
She still knew that any kind of request still involves the idea of a fair exchange, an equal exchange. Yes?
Yes.
I'm not just saying you're freeloading. I'm saying there always has to be some form of exchange. But nevertheless, again, staying in that positive state allowed her to suggest an equal form of exchange. She went to the airline and said, I would like to ask you to fly me around the world for free to take pictures, beautiful pictures. Look, here's some of the pictures I've already taken. Aren't they gorgeous? Yes, they are. I would like you to fly me around the world for free and take pictures of these gorgeous sacred sites. And in exchange, you may use the photographs in your brochures to attract tourists to your airline. Deal, they said. And not only did they fly her everywhere for free, they paid her, put her up in the best hotels, fed her the best food. She lived like a queen, didn't spend a dime, made money, got her dream. Now, is your imagination that strong? Is your imagination that big?
Is your imagination that big? Darryl, what can I say? That story is so powerful, and it's one that Bashar shared about a friend of yours, someone that you know personally who executed on the incredible power of imagination. You know, I have to tell you, my original intent was to open with the idea of multiple versions of reality and of our planet, and maybe we can still manage to fold some of that into our discussion. But after hearing this account, I had to lead off with this because, you know, so many, especially these days, are feeling so discouraged by what appears to be possible versus what actually is. So I'd like to open with that. What is imagination?
As Bashar explains it, imagination is the conduit of communication between your higher mind and your physical mind. And when you open that conduit, it allows you to have the kinds of inspirations, the kinds of ideas that are in alignment with your true vibration, which is expressed as excitement, passion, joy, creativity. Mm-hmm. And it's being willing to understand that those inspirations are coming to you from the higher mind to guide you mm-hmm. toward more of your true self. And when you act on the things that are exciting, no matter how out of the box they may seem, it really is the path of least resistance for you if it's aligned with your passion. That's what the passion tells you. That's what the inspirations and imagination are telling you, is that this is really the path that is keyed to you, that will work best for you mm-hmm. in general.
Okay, that makes sense. And yet so many, I think, Darryl, are losing sight of passion or maybe feeling a little that it's a futile endeavor because there's so many stresses of real life pulling on them that they forget that, or maybe they haven't even discovered it. You know, imagination and things like daydreaming, as we're talking mm-hmm. about, have in this society been so discouraged, unfortunately, and to some considered an utter waste of time, daydreaming, which I happen to love. And yet
right.
there are so many, paradoxically, who revere our greatest thinkers without taking into account that it was their imagination that catapulted them to the level of greatness that the masses so admire. This seems to me to be a bit of hypocrisy. What do you think?
Well, yeah, it's certainly a paradoxical point of view, or it's just that a lot of people think they don't have that capacity. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think one of the most important reasons Bashar told that story and made sure that everyone understood that he wasn't just making it up, that it actually happened to a real person on the earth, is to get people to understand that these kinds of things can occur in physical reality if we stay in certain states of being. Mm-hmm. That it's not just a fairy tale, it's not just made up. It is actually the way life works. Absolutely. When we get into alignment and into flow with our true energy. So he wanted to ground it, so to speak, in a very realistic situation, you know. And then there are other stories of other people that either I know or other people know that he often uses as examples, again, to make sure people understand that if it can happen to them, it can happen to anyone, because they are just real people living daily lives, and it's just the only difference between what happened to those people and what may be being felt by the average person is just that these people were willing to stay in a positive state, to stay in alignment with their true vibration, and then these are the kinds of things that occur.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that there are some people, Darryl, that have a propensity or a proclivity toward being in that state? It's a more natural way of being, you know, sort of the right brain versus left brain type of individual?
Well, certainly, but again, I think a lot of it has to do with what we were allowed to do or what was allowed to be okay when we were growing up. I mean, certainly a lot of this is, we're either taught out of it. Mm-hmm. I think it's a very natural state to be in alignment with passion, with one's passion, because you certainly see that in children all the time. But absolutely. I think that a lot of times we're sort of talked out of it by our parents, our friends, our schools, our society, and then we kind of have to relearn it. So it may just be kind of a rusty talent, but I think it's innate in everyone.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I certainly do. And as I've said many times, I think the times in which we are living, which I agree, and many others, maybe perhaps you do too, that we're in this sort of proverbial shift. And I contend that perhaps, not having that passion and not acting on our imagination may have its consequences. So it seems to me that, and I have to say that's something else, if I could quote Bashar, he translates the term imagination as a state of being that's literally magical. He spelled it out. Magi, nation. We are a nation of magicians. I love that. I think that's so amazing. Well, getting back to your friend, if I may, she allowed her passion to bring her into a state of proactive thought. This really tells me that passion is not just a notion. It's a vibration. It's a frequency that we must be on in order to hear the messages that will assist us on our own journey to realize our passion, right?
Well, yeah, because as Bashar says, you cannot perceive what you're not the vibration of first. So if you're not in that state, you can't even begin to perceive the kinds of opportunities or situations or ideas or inspirations that would allow you to move on those things, that would allow you to take action on those things. If you're of a completely different frequency, those kinds of opportunities and those kinds of thoughts are just invisible to you.
Okay.
That's why it's so important to be in that state first, because nothing can happen on that level while you're not in that state. I mean, even Einstein said, you can't solve a problem from the same level in which the problem was created. You have to go to a higher level of perception in order to even be capable of seeing a solution.
Okay, well, that makes sense. So many people know this intellectually, Darryl, but it again, and I hope I'm not belaboring it, but it just seems like it's such, because you get these questions, I'm sure, over and over again, and I think they're pretty clear, and yet it seems that there is some sort of a block, and we've talked about that. We won't stay on this too long, but I agree. I think our teaching has. Conventional teaching, unfortunately, has perhaps done us a disservice to, again, discouraging imagination, discouraging true passion. I think people oftentimes will think they have a passion, again, relative to what they have been taught their passion can be, that laundry list that someone else gave them. And therefore, it's never really a passion, and therefore can never get on that vibration, right?
Right, or, certainly they will, they'll tire themselves out trying. Because if something is really not your frequency and you're attempting to do something like that, it's going to take a toll over time, because it's like you're resisting the natural flow. You're trying to swim upstream, and eventually that's going to tire you out. And maybe sometimes that's what people will do, is they'll just keep going against the flow over and over and over again until they get so tired they finally sort of surrender to the flow, and that's when they finally realize things start happening for them in a more positive way. But rather than call these things blocks, I would rather refer to them, as Bashar does, as it's simply definitions that we have bought into as true that are simply out of alignment with who we really are. And that's actually the telltale key, is that, when you have certain feelings that, we would call quote-unquote negative feelings, or you're feeling uncomfortable about something, or resistant to something, or self-doubtful, or, things like that, that's your first clue that you may be dealing with definitions in your unconscious mind that you're unaware of that are out of alignment with who you are. And it's all about owning the emotion that you're feeling that is being generated by that definition, and using the emotion to trace back to what the definition would have to be in order to feel what you're feeling. Because as Bashar explains it, you can't actually have a feeling until you have a definition. So you can use the feelings you have that may seem to be very limiting feelings and say, what would I have to believe is true about myself in this circumstance in order to feel the way I do? And if people are willing to hear the answer, usually in some form or another, whether through just inspiration or dreams or synchronicity, the answer will come. You'll find out what that definition is. And anytime you identify a definition that you've been holding on to that is actually truly not in alignment with who you are, as soon as you identify it, it will automatically appear nonsensical, illogical, and you'll realize that you simply bought into it from someone else and it doesn't belong to you. And as soon as you realize those things, you just drop it, because it makes no sense to hold on to it anymore.